In the year 44 CE, the political landscape of Judea was tense and fraught with uncertainty, as Herod Agrippa I ascended to power with a determined ambition to consolidate his authority and maintain strict control over the region. Agrippa's focus on suppressing the leaders of the early church was not merely a tactical maneuver, but a clear reflection of his acute awareness of the potential threat posed by spiritual movements to political dominance. In his eyes, the nascent Christian community, small and fledgling though it was, represented a latent challenge to Roman authority. The power of their faith and the cohesion it fostered among its members had the potential to inspire popular loyalty in ways that secular authority could not easily contain, thereby threatening the delicate political balance Agrippa sought to maintain. Agrippa's accession to the throne came at a time when physical power was regarded as the ultimate measure of authority. He commanded a formidable military force, rigorously disciplined and trained to execute orders with near-perfect precision. The Roman army's presence was not merely a deterrent, it was a tangible embodiment of the state's absolute authority. Every prison, every chain, every iron-barred cell symbolized the inescapable reach of human power, while the relentless watch of guards reinforced the impression that resistance was futile. Each guard post, each lock and shackle carried both a physical and psychological weight, impressing upon all who might defy the system that the might of Rome could crush any opposition, even that of an inspired minority. Yet, in stark contrast to this overwhelming material strength, the early Christian believers possessed a power of an entirely different nature, spiritual, invisible, yet profound in its effect. Their weapons were neither swords nor shields, but persistent and heartfelt prayer, faith, and unyielding devotion. While Herod and his soldiers relied on intimidation and coercion to enforce their will, the followers of the church relied on a force beyond the physical, a spiritual energy capable of sustaining them and inspiring extraordinary courage and perseverance. This created a fundamental tension between two forms of power, one tangible, coercive, and immediate, the other intangible, moral, and enduring. Both exerted a strong influence, but in markedly different ways, shaping the social and political fabric of Judea. The contrast between these powers was stark. Roman authority appeared absolute, backed by iron and military discipline. Prisons were designed to enforce compliance, chains and shackles rendered escape nearly impossible, while guards maintained constant vigilance. Every security measure was intended to assert dominance and create an impression of unassailable control. From the perspective of the human mind, the early church seemed powerless, at the mercy of the state's vast apparatus. And yet, the believers possessed something that no amount of material strength could touch: an internal cohesion strengthened by faith, a courage born of prayer, and an unwavering commitment to their beliefs. Their strength lay not in conquering by force, but in enduring and persisting against all odds, demonstrating the capacity of spiritual power to challenge and even transcend worldly authority. This juxtaposition of physical and spiritual power set the stage for a profound historical tension. It was a moment in which human might and divine providence appeared to collide, each testing the limits of the other. While Herod and his soldiers relied on imprisonment, surveillance, and punishment, the early church relied on prayer, hope, and collective faith. The contrast highlighted a deeper truth: that material power, no matter how formidable, is ultimately limited when confronted with the resilience and conviction of the human spirit fortified by belief. The tension between the two forces, temporal authority and spiritual devotion, was not only a matter of governance and social control, but also a moral and philosophical dilemma, raising questions about the nature of true power and the means by which it is exercised and sustained. Ultimately, the political context of 44 CE was more than a simple account of Herod Agrippa consolidating his reign. It was a vivid illustration of the clash between worldly power and spiritual authority. The Roman state, with its prisons, iron chains, and disciplined legions, represented the physical manifestation of dominion and control. The early church, though small and vulnerable, wielded an invisible yet potent power of faith and communal prayer that could inspire courage, sustain hope, and, as events would soon reveal, challenge even the most absolute human authority. This stark contrast between coercion and belief, between temporal force and spiritual resilience, not only shaped the immediate historical moment, but also laid the groundwork for subsequent events in which divine intervention and human faith would redefine the possibilities of what could be achieved, even in the face of overwhelming odds. In essence, the year 44 CE presented a historical moment in which two kinds of power collided: the physical, coercive might of Herod Agrippa and the Roman state, and the moral, spiritual influence of a fledgling faith community. Roman authority sought to enforce obedience through fear and material constraint, while the early believers relied on prayer, unity, and unwavering faith as their shield and strength. This tension created a landscape in which the limits of human power would be tested and, ultimately, where spiritual conviction would demonstrate its capacity to transcend even the most formidable physical constraints. It was a time when the invisible yet undeniable force of belief could challenge the tangible instruments of domination, setting the stage for miracles, liberation, and the eventual growth of a movement that could not be contained by mere chains or human decree. The conditions under which Peter was imprisoned were nothing short of formidable, reflecting the full extent of Roman power and Herod Agrippa's determination to crush any potential resistance. His cell was not a mere room, but a tightly controlled fortress, designed to ensure that escape was virtually impossible. 16 soldiers were assigned to his custody, forming a human cordon of discipline and vigilance around him, while 2 heavy chains bound his wrists, physically restraining him and symbolically representing the weight of authority imposed by the state. Every detail of this confinement, from the placement of guards to the thickness of the iron bars, was meticulously calculated to prevent any attempt at flight. The prison was suffused with darkness, silence, and a palpable sense of hopelessness, conveying the full psychological impact of being entirely at the mercy of human power. Yet, despite these extreme measures, Peter's imprisonment also became a stage for an extraordinary intersection of human vulnerability and divine intervention. As he lay bound in the cold darkness, an angel suddenly appeared, disrupting the absolute dominion of Rome in the most dramatic fashion. This apparition was not a subtle vision, but a force that instantaneously dissolved the iron restraints and rendered the soldiers oblivious to his departure. The chains that had represented unyielding human authority vanished, and the oppressive sense of confinement was replaced by a surreal sensation of liberation. The miraculous event served as a vivid demonstration that spiritual power, when acting through divine will, could override the most secure structures of human oppression. Peter's state of mind during this extraordinary escape is as compelling as the supernatural elements themselves. He moved through 3 successive guard posts, each one more heavily fortified than the last, yet he did so in a state of near trance, completely absorbed in the command and guidance of the angelic presence. His movements were deliberate yet unresisting, guided entirely by a higher power, demonstrating an absolute trust that transcended fear and self-preservation. This psychological state highlights a key aspect of the story. The believer's reliance on divine direction allows for acts that would otherwise seem impossible, a theme that underscores the contrast between human limitation and spiritual possibility. Peter's calm obedience, his almost hypnotic adherence to the instructions given, provides a sharp counterpoint to the rigid structures of the Roman prison, revealing that true freedom is not always measured in physical terms but in alignment with divine purpose. The climax of this miraculous escape came with the opening of the massive iron gate that sealed the outer boundary of the prison. This gate, representing the ultimate symbol of human power and control, swung open seemingly of its own accord, signaling the limits of human authority. For the first time, the oppressive grip of Herod's regime was palpably breached. not through force or cunning, but through the intervention of a power that defied the natural order. The moment the gate opened, the prison ceased to be a place of confinement. It became a testament to the futility of relying solely on material force to suppress spiritual truth. This event serves as a dramatic illustration of the broader principle that divine influence can dismantle even the most impenetrable human systems, and it provides a powerful narrative about the intersection of faith and freedom. Meanwhile, the believers outside the prison were engaged in prayer, unaware of the precise nature of the miracle that was unfolding. In Mary's house, the early church had gathered in anticipation, petitioning for deliverance even as they doubted the likelihood of a tangible result. The scene underscores the communal aspect of spiritual power. The prayers of the faithful, united and fervent, created a spiritual resonance that was integral to the unfolding miracle. Their devotion, though unseen, was a critical component of the narrative, reflecting the idea that collective faith can operate alongside divine intervention to effect outcomes that transcend ordinary human expectation. It also sets the stage for the poignant tension when Rhoda, a young servant, hears Peter's voice at the door, but is initially dismissed by the more experienced disciples, who cannot reconcile their expectations with the reality of the miracle. This moment captures the limits of human perception in the face of spiritual truth, emphasizing the theme that faith often requires openness to the unexpected. Peter's emergence through the final door transforms not only his personal fate, but also the emotional and psychological state of the gathered believers. What begins as anxious, almost desperate anticipation shifts to astonishment and awe as the reality of the miracle becomes undeniable. The juxtaposition between expectation and realization reinforces the extraordinary nature of the event, highlighting the tension between human skepticism and divine action. The physical barriers, cells, chains, guards, are rendered irrelevant in the face of spiritual authority, and the believer's reaction underscores the transformative impact of witnessing a divine act firsthand. The collective shift from doubt to wonder encapsulates a central message that spiritual realities, while often invisible or counterintuitive, possess the power to redefine human understanding and experience. Furthermore, the immediate consequences for Herod Agrippa's regime and the Roman guards reinforce the story's broader political and social implications. The guards, who had relied entirely on the strength of the state apparatus, were powerless witnesses to a breach they could neither prevent nor comprehend. The failure of the prison system, meticulously designed to enforce compliance, illustrates the limitations of human authority when confronted with forces beyond its control. For Herod himself, this event foreshadows the abrupt and unexpected collapse of his power, demonstrating that human schemes, however carefully orchestrated, are ultimately vulnerable to forces that transcend the material world. The narrative draws a clear link between the emptied prison and the sudden disruption in political authority, illustrating the intertwined nature of spiritual liberation and socio-political consequences. Finally, the episode serves as a catalyst for the early church, marking a transition from secretive gatherings to a more public and expansive mission. The miraculous deliverance emboldens the disciples, confirming that no prison, decree, or human opposition could inhibit the spread of their message. This newfound courage and confidence are reflected in the community's willingness to engage openly and expand their outreach, laying the groundwork for the global influence that Christianity would eventually achieve. The story of Peter's liberation thus functions on multiple levels: as a narrative of personal deliverance, as a demonstration of divine power over worldly authority, and as a transformative moment for a faith community, inspiring bold action and reinforcing the centrality of belief in shaping both individual and collective destiny. In summary, the conditions of Peter's imprisonment, the miraculous intervention by the angel, and his subsequent escape offer a compelling narrative about the interplay between human authority and divine power. The meticulous security measures, the psychological weight of confinement, and the formidable strength of Roman forces all underscore the apparent invincibility of earthly power. Yet, through unwavering faith, divine intervention, and the communal prayers of the believers, these constraints are rendered ineffective. The story illustrates not only the triumph of spiritual power over physical oppression, but also the broader implications for a faith community that learns, through direct experience, that its mission cannot be contained by any earthly force. The miraculous release is a testament to the enduring principle that true power often lies not in human might, but in spiritual conviction and divine providence, shaping the course of history and empowering communities to transcend seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Meanwhile, in the house of Mary, mother of John Mark, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation, tension, and quiet desperation. The disciples had gathered there in fervent prayer, their voices blending into a tapestry of hope and pleading, beseeching God for an intervention they scarcely dared to imagine. Every whispered word carried the weight of fear and expectation. Every bowed head and clasped hand reflected the delicate balance between faith and doubt. They prayed not with certainty of the outcome, but with a fragile hope that somehow, through divine will, the chains and bars that held Peter captive could be broken. The scene inside Mary's house was intimate, yet charged with an almost tangible energy, a convergence of human longing and spiritual appeal, where the invisible force of prayer intersected with the possibility of a miraculous resolution. It was within this charged atmosphere that a moment of extraordinary dissonance occurred. Rhoda, a young servant girl, heard a familiar voice at the door and, in an instant, recognized it as Peter's. Her heart leapt with a mixture of disbelief and elation, and in her excitement, she ran to announce what she had heard. Yet her announcement, instead of eliciting immediate joy or action, was met with skepticism and incredulity from the older, more experienced disciples. They dismissed her claim as impossible, suggesting that it must be a spirit or a figment of her imagination. The irony of the situation was striking. The young and sensitive servant girl, whose perception was keen and intuitive, recognized the truth of Peter's presence immediately, while those who had witnessed countless miracles and had deep spiritual experience could not reconcile their expectations with what was happening. This moment highlighted a recurrent theme in the narrative. Human perception is often limited by preconceived notions, and faith is frequently challenged by doubt, even among those who are most devoted. The tension in the room grew as Rhoda insisted on what she had heard, her voice both pleading and urgent. The disciples oscillated between hope and disbelief, caught between the fervor of their prayers and the stark reality of Peter's imprisonment. Every passing second seemed to stretch indefinitely, amplifying both anxiety and anticipation. The scene underscores a psychological truth. The perception of miracles is filtered through the lens of expectation. Those who cling rigidly to established patterns of thought may find it difficult to recognize extraordinary events, while those who remain open, intuitive, and sensitive may perceive the miraculous even before it fully manifests. Rhoda's keen recognition of Peter's voice thus becomes emblematic of a broader principle. Faith is not merely an intellectual acknowledgement, but also an attunement to the subtle movements of divine action. Then came the climactic moment. The door opened. The transition from waiting to realization was instantaneous, yet profoundly transformative. The disciples, who had been entrenched in a state of anxious supplication, suddenly confronted the undeniable presence of Peter before them. The shift in mood was palpable. What had begun as desperate yearning transformed into astonished recognition. The miracle that had seemed almost unimaginable was now unfolding in tangible, undeniable reality. The joy, relief, and wonder that swept through the room were overwhelming. The disciples' emotional journey mirrored the spiritual lesson embedded in the event. Faith, even when tempered by doubt, was vindicated. The act of divine liberation was no longer a distant hope, but a concrete reality, reinforcing the power of belief and the efficacy of persistent prayer. This scene, however, is significant not only for its emotional impact, but also for its symbolic resonance. The opening of the door is emblematic, representing the threshold between despair and hope, confinement and freedom, doubt and affirmation. Peter's emergence through that doorway is both literal and metaphorical, a passage from the limitations of human power into the limitless possibilities afforded by divine intervention. The transformation of the disciples' mood captures the essence of the miracle, the recognition that spiritual truths can manifest in the material world, often in ways that defy conventional understanding. The juxtaposition of skepticism and revelation, of human expectation and divine reality, highlights the ongoing tension in the spiritual journey. Faith must often navigate doubt before reaching full comprehension. Moreover, the episode underscores the communal dimension of belief. The miracle did not occur in isolation. It was intertwined with the prayers, hopes, and collective longing of the gathered believers. Their unified supplication created the conditions for the extraordinary event, demonstrating that spiritual power is amplified in community. The disciples' eventual recognition of Peter's presence reinforces the lesson that miracles are not merely individual experiences, but can serve as pivotal moments for the entire faith community. In witnessing Peter's deliverance, the disciples experienced a profound affirmation of their mission and of the sustaining power of faith, realizing that their prayers and devotion had tangible, transformative consequences. The interplay between human doubt and divine action also carries profound psychological and theological implications. The disciples' initial skepticism reflects a natural tendency to rely on empirical reasoning and prior experience, even in the context of faith. Rhoda's perceptive recognition, in contrast, illustrates the importance of spiritual attentiveness, openness, and receptivity to unexpected occurrences. This contrast emphasizes a recurring theme. Spiritual insight is often counterintuitive, requiring a willingness to embrace possibilities beyond conventional understanding. The narrative thereby teaches that faith involves both patience and perceptiveness, cultivating a readiness to recognize and respond to divine intervention when it arises. As Peter finally stepped fully into the house, the collective astonishment of the disciples solidified a crucial lesson: that human efforts, no matter how well-intentioned or well-organized, are limited when measured against the scope of divine power. The prison, the guards, and the chains, symbols of temporal authority, had been rendered powerless. The miracle reinforced the enduring principle that true deliverance is not always a product of strategy or force, but of persistence, prayer, and alignment with divine will. The disciples' awe and joy reflected both relief and enlightenment. They had witnessed the tangible consequences of their faith and their prayers, and in doing so, had been spiritually emboldened to continue their mission. Ultimately, the knocking at the door and Peter's miraculous appearance serve as a powerful narrative of faith, perception, and divine orchestration. The young servant's sensitivity, the experienced disciples' initial skepticism, and the final revelation collectively convey the dynamic interplay between human expectation and divine reality. The transformation from anxious supplication to ecstatic recognition illustrates the profound capacity of faith to reshape perception, generate hope, and reaffirm the principles of spiritual trust. In this pivotal episode, the ordinary and the extraordinary converge, demonstrating that the boundaries of possibility are expanded through devotion and communal prayer, and that miracles often serve as catalysts for renewed commitment, courage, and collective empowerment within a faith community. In essence, the events in Mary's house capture the dual dimensions of the miracle, the deeply personal and the widely communal. They reveal the human struggle to reconcile hope with doubt, expectation with reality, and perception with spiritual truth. The opening of the door is both a literal and metaphorical moment, marking the passage from fear to assurance, from uncertainty to certainty, and from limitation to possibility. It stands as a testament to the transformative power of faith, showing that when belief is coupled with persistence and communal devotion, it can manifest in ways that transcend human understanding, affirming the enduring capacity of spiritual conviction to reshape reality and inspire collective awe and action. The immediate political aftermath of Peter's miraculous release sent shockwaves through the Roman garrison and the administrative machinery of Herod Agrippa. The soldiers, who had been tasked with the inescapable custody of a single prisoner, found themselves utterly powerless in the face of an event that defied all human expectation. Trained for discipline, rigor, and absolute obedience, they were suddenly confronted with the inexplicable disappearance of the man they were sworn to guard. Panic, confusion, and a profound sense of helplessness swept through the ranks. The carefully maintained order of the guard unit, a microcosm of Roman military efficiency, collapsed within moments. Their failure was not merely a personal embarrassment, but a symbolic demonstration that the authority of the state, while formidable in conventional circumstances, could be rendered ineffective when confronted by forces beyond human comprehension. In essence, the soldiers' paralysis underscored the limits of coercive power, revealing that material control is inherently vulnerable to the intervention of the extraordinary. For Herod Agrippa himself, the event was a profound and destabilizing shock. The king, accustomed to exercising near absolute authority within his domain, witnessed a breach that exposed the fragility of his control. The empty prison, once a symbol of unassailable power, now stood as a monument to the limits of human governance. In the political calculus of the region, this sudden and dramatic failure reverberated beyond the walls of the prison, signaling an unexpected vulnerability in the hierarchy that had long relied on fear, intimidation, and surveillance to maintain order. The very apparatus that was designed to project strength, guards, chains, and secure cells, became emblematic of weakness, highlighting the vulnerability of political authority when confronted with forces that operate outside conventional understanding. This juxtaposition between expectation and reality marked a pivotal turning point in the regional power structure, one that would have lasting implications for the balance of influence between secular rulers and spiritual movements. Herod Agrippa's own downfall followed swiftly after this extraordinary occurrence, a historical turning point that further cemented the lesson of the event. The sudden collapse of his authority was not a gradual decline, but a dramatic, almost theatrical unraveling of power. His inability to contain Peter and, by extension, the burgeoning influence of the early church exposed a fundamental truth about governance. Control derived solely from coercion and intimidation is inherently fragile. The empty prison, once a mere backdrop to the power of Rome, became a potent symbol of the vacuity of oppressive authority. Just as the cells were vacated, so too did the political landscape experience a void, an abrupt absence of the previously unchallenged figure of Herod, leaving a gap in the mechanisms of secular control. This vacuum created opportunities for reorganization, realignment, and, crucially, the expansion of influence for those who had previously operated under suppression. For the early church, the implications were both immediate and transformative. The liberation of Peter provided more than a dramatic narrative of divine intervention. It served as a tangible validation of the church's spiritual authority, in contrast to the coercive power of the state. With Herod's grip weakened and the mechanisms of oppression momentarily nullified, the church found itself in a unique position to operate with greater freedom and visibility. The faithful could gather, teach, and propagate their message without the same level of fear that had previously constrained them. This newfound latitude was not simply an operational advantage, it was a profound affirmation that the spiritual power nurtured through prayer, community, and devotion could withstand, and indeed overcome, the most formidable material obstacles. The early believers now understood that their mission was not confined by walls, chains, or decrees, but was sustained by a transcendent force that could not be subdued by human hands. The political consequences and the Church's resulting empowerment are inseparable. The collapse of Herod's authority created a structural void that extended beyond the personal failure of one ruler. It disrupted the network of surveillance, coercion, and intimidation that had kept spiritual movements in check. In the absence of these constraints, the early Church was able to consolidate its presence, extend its reach, and strengthen its communal and doctrinal cohesion. The juxtaposition is striking. Where the Roman state relied on tangible instruments of control, the Church relied on intangible instruments of faith, conviction, and collective spiritual resilience. The events surrounding Peter's release illustrate a fundamental inversion of power. The less visible, non-coercive forces of belief proved more durable and influential than the most sophisticated mechanisms of oppression. This episode also highlights the enduring interplay between spiritual authority and temporal governance. The empty prison serves as both a literal and metaphorical signal of shifting dynamics. Physical chains were rendered ineffective, and in parallel, the structures that supported Herod's authority began to fracture. The psychological impact on both the oppressors and the oppressed cannot be overstated. For the soldiers, the experience instilled a recognition of their own limitations, a direct encounter with the limits of human power in the face of divine action. For the early Church, the miracle confirmed the primacy of spiritual authority and reinforced the efficacy of persistent prayer, communal devotion, and moral courage. In a single event, the balance of perceived power shifted dramatically, signaling to all observers that the spiritual domain could transcend and even redefine the parameters of temporal control. Finally, the narrative of Peter's liberation exemplifies a universal principle relevant to both historical and contemporary contexts: the endurance of spiritual authority in the face of oppression. While material power is often immediate, visible, and coercive, it remains contingent on human limitations and susceptible to disruption. Spiritual power, in contrast, derives its strength from conviction, communal solidarity, and alignment with transcendent principles, enabling it to operate effectively even against overwhelming odds. The Church's experience following Peter's release demonstrates the capacity of a belief system to assert itself in the public sphere, expanding its influence and resilience despite previous constraints. The empty prison thus becomes an emblem of liberation not only for one man but for an entire movement, reinforcing the notion that faith, courage, and spiritual cohesion can outlast, outmaneuver, and ultimately surpass even the most formidable structures of worldly authority. In sum, the political aftermath of Peter's miraculous deliverance illuminates the collapse of oppressive power and the enduring potency of spiritual authority. The Roman guards' panic, the disruption of Herod's control, and the vacated prison collectively signify the limitations of coercion and the vulnerability inherent in systems built solely on fear and force. Conversely, the early Church's newfound operational freedom, bolstered by the demonstration of divine intervention, underscores the superior and lasting power of faith, prayer, and communal cohesion. The events represent a decisive turning point: the failure of material oppression, the liberation of a spiritual community, and the affirmation that true authority resides not merely in human structures, but in the moral and spiritual forces that can redefine the boundaries of possibility. Through this episode, history records a profound lesson: that spiritual resilience and collective faith can challenge, disrupt, and ultimately surpass the most entrenched forms of temporal power, reshaping both individual lives and societal structures in ways that endure far beyond the immediate moment. The miraculous deliverance of Peter did not merely mark a personal rescue or a temporary victory over oppressive power. It became a catalytic event that redefined the trajectory of the early Church, transforming it from a local, clandestine assembly into a movement with the capacity to reach far beyond the confines of Jerusalem. The immediate impact of the miracle was psychological as much as it was practical. The apostles, previously constrained by fear of persecution and the limitations imposed by Roman authority, found themselves emboldened by the undeniable demonstration of divine intervention. The chains that once bound Peter, now vanished, became a potent metaphor for the liberation of the church itself, a vivid reminder that spiritual resilience and faith can outlast and surpass even the most formidable earthly obstacles. This recognition inspired the apostles to reconsider their approach. From secret gatherings hidden in private homes, they began to organize public preaching, teaching, and mission work that extended beyond their immediate community, envisioning a reach that was not bounded by geography, politics, or human authority. The miracle provided both the moral courage and the practical validation the apostles needed to act boldly. In the months following Peter's release, the church began to expand its operations with a new level of confidence. The disciples realized that no physical prison, no royal edict, and no decree of worldly authority could halt the message they carried, the message of hope, redemption, and divine sovereignty. This understanding catalyzed a strategic shift. The church transitioned from a reactive posture of survival and discretion to a proactive posture of outreach and dissemination. Missionaries traveled to new towns, engaged in public debates, and shared their teachings with diverse audiences, recognizing that the power sustaining their message was not contingent on secrecy or safety, but on a spiritual authority that had already proven itself in the miraculous. The event became a narrative touchstone, a story repeated in gatherings and used as inspiration to strengthen both faith and resolve across the community. Psychologically, the church experienced a profound transformation. Where once the disciples had approached their mission with caution, fear, and the hope of mere survival, they now operated with a heightened sense of purpose and invulnerability. The realization that divine power could override the most secure and oppressive human systems instilled in them a new confidence, one rooted not in political maneuvering or military might, but in the certainty of spiritual support. This shift reinforced communal cohesion. Believers understood that they were part of a larger design, united in a shared mission that transcended their individual limitations. Faith, once tested by confinement and threat, became an operational tool, a motivating force that empowered coordinated action and inspired others to join the movement. The church's internal psychology transformed from caution to boldness, from self-preservation to expansive vision, illustrating the profound effect that perceived divine support can have on collective behavior and strategic initiative. The broader implications of this transformation extended beyond the immediate circle of the apostles. As the church's activities became more public, the social perception of the community shifted. No longer perceived solely as a hidden sect vulnerable to suppression, the church demonstrated resilience, consistency, and the capacity to operate even in the shadow of powerful opposition. The story of Peter's deliverance circulated widely, serving as both testimony and evidence of the church's supernatural endorsement. This narrative functioned as a persuasive tool, attracting new adherents, reinforcing the commitment of existing members, and legitimizing the church's growing influence in a world dominated by political and military authority. In essence, the miracle acted as a strategic catalyst, allowing a small, localized faith community to project itself on a global scale, amplifying both its presence and its message far beyond what had previously seemed possible. From a contemporary perspective, the liberation of Peter offers enduring lessons for modern communities and organizations. It illustrates that moments of breakthrough, instances in which the constraints of the immediate environment are suddenly overturned, can redefine the boundaries of what is considered feasible. Just as the apostles discovered that human authority could not suppress the spiritual force of their mission, modern communities can learn that resilience, shared purpose, and faith, whether in principles, vision, or collective action, can overcome significant challenges. The story demonstrates that perseverance in the face of adversity, coupled with an openness to transformative forces, creates conditions where improbable outcomes become possible. In other words, extraordinary breakthroughs often emerge not from brute force or conventional strategy, but from a combination of steadfast commitment, collective effort, and a readiness to act when opportunity presents itself. Furthermore, the narrative reinforces the importance of cultivating both internal confidence and communal solidarity. The apostles' courage was inseparable from their understanding that they were supported by a larger, sustaining power. Similarly, modern communities can draw strength from shared conviction and mutual reinforcement, recognizing that collective resilience often outlasts individual vulnerability. The psychological impact of witnessing or participating in a moment of liberation, whether literal or metaphorical, cannot be overstated. It reshapes perception, strengthens resolve, and catalyzes future action. Peter's release thus serves not only as a historical and spiritual exemplar, but also as a timeless blueprint for how breakthroughs can occur, how confidence can be nurtured, and how communities can transform adversity into momentum for growth and influence. Ultimately, the journey from a persecuted, localized sect to a confident, globally reaching movement underscores a critical principle: the transformative power of faith, courage, and collective vision. The Church's expansion was facilitated not by wealth, force, or political privilege, but by the recognition that the spiritual mission it carried transcended earthly constraints. The early Christians demonstrated that when belief is paired with persistent action and communal reinforcement, seemingly insurmountable barriers can be overcome, allowing ideas, values, and movements to spread across vast social and geographical boundaries. This evolution, from secret gatherings to public ministry, from fear to boldness, from vulnerability to influence, illustrates the potential inherent in any community willing to embrace resilience, faith, and purpose as guiding forces. The story of Peter's deliverance thus serves as both historical inspiration and modern guidance. It reminds contemporary audiences that moments of breakthrough can redefine what is possible, that faith, spiritual, moral, or communal, can overcome barriers that appear absolute, and that collective resilience magnifies the impact of individual courage. It underscores that the most enduring forms of power are often invisible, rooted in conviction and shared purpose rather than in coercion or material control. By reflecting on this narrative, modern communities are invited to consider how their own challenges might be approached with perseverance, imagination, and trust in principles larger than themselves, recognizing that the combination of faith and action has the potential to effect transformative change. If you found this exploration of Peter's miraculous liberation and its transformative impact on the early church insightful, consider subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into historical, spiritual, and transformative narratives. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss future content, and follow us as we continue to uncover stories that inspire faith, resilience, and courage in communities both ancient and modern. By joining our audience, you become part of a community committed to understanding how historical lessons and spiritual insights can shape our world today, demonstrating that even the smallest acts of perseverance and belief can create ripple effects with global significance.